G'day, eh? I'm your favorite Canadian tech pundit and all-around nice guy, Northern Nerd. I'd like to talk about something that's been weighing on me lately, and that's the fate of the Canadian automotive manufacturing industry, particularly in light of the US president's attack on it the last year or so. Of course, I mean the giant orange orangutan, Donald Trump, and his ignorant lickspittle and human equivalent of a poorly shaven scrotum, Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick. Lutnick has said quite a few nasty things recently about Canada's auto workers. He says that he's going to do an America First focus, and Lutnick indicated the U.S. no longer wants to see vehicles assembled in Canada coming across the border and aim for a repatriation of the manufacturing capacity of the United States. He said that the U.S. might continue to buy parts from Canada, but Canada should take a back seat in overall vehicle production to the US. And he dismissed the possibility of a trade-free auto deal with Canada. That's just not in the cards, according to him. Now, most of Canada's auto sector is situated in small towns in Ontario, Canada, which sits on the border with Detroit, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford. The Premier is kind of like the head honcho for the province. Doug Ford termed this a massive threat and suggested the need for countermeasures, including a restriction of critical minerals, and industry leaders highlighted the risk of long-term threats to investment and the established 100-year integrated supply chain between Canada and the United States. Now, I could be one more voice and a chorus of people saying how, what is obviously true, how utterly stupid Trump and Lutnick are being, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to talk about a little piece of history back when Canada had dreams of producing a car of its own. And then I'm going to talk about our future dreams of Canadian EVs. Now, around 1970, which was before the Northern Nerd was even a twinkle in his daddy's eye, Quebec in Canada, came out with a planned sports car. And it was intended to rival Ferrari, believe it or not. It was called the Manic GT. Pretty cool name, eh? Basically, it's manic. I spelled manic. It's a strange name. Paging Dr. Freud, type of thing. But it was actually named for Quebec's Manicouagan River and its Manic 5 Dam, which is a hydroelectric dam. It was the brainchild of Jacques Abou, who is a former Renault Canada employee and an entrepreneur, and the son of a French automotive journalist, Pierre Abou. And after he joined Renault, he was asked to find out if the Alpine A110 sports car, built by a company associated with Renault throughout Europe, might be a viable seller in Canada and in the United States. And after some research, he reported back to Renault that, yeah, it would be a seller. But Renault passed on that little sports car. Well, as it stands, the car was built mostly on a rigid steel frame and had a super lightweight fiberglass shell and Renault parts and engine, which was kind of a recipe for racing, excellence. It boasted a top speed of 135 miles per hour, and it was a cute little two-seater that looked like a cross between, if Ferrari and Porsche got it on a vacation at Chateau Montebello and they made a little love child. Out came the Manic GT. I think it looked pretty sexy, and it probably handled really well since it was an all-wheel independent suspension and had a reasonable horsepower for its weight. The GT offered a rear-mounted 1.3-liter four-cylinder engine and a standard manual four-speed transmission. However, the output of the larger engine, I think it was 105 cc engine, that produced 80 horsepower. It's a small engine and underpowered compared to, say, like a Mustang or a Corvette. But because this thing was basically like a go-kart on wheels, it would have been a pretty quick touring car. About's charming salesmanship and determination convinced Bombardier, which is a big snowmobile company, and Steinberg Groceries and the governments of Quebec and Canada, the federal government, to invest in this plan. And at the time, 1970, he raised $1.5 million, which doesn't sound like very much, but by today's standards, it's about $12.5 million. Still doesn't sound like much, for seed money for maybe a big company, a car company today, but it was big stuff for Canada in 1970, I can tell you that. So around 30 cars were built as prototypes to kind of perfect the concept. And the basic body of the car was designed by a race car driver from France, Serge Soumil, who had come to Canada to compete in the racing version of this car. The running gear and floor pan came from Renault because Canada had a stipulation for receiving federal funds that 65% of the car had to be Canadian, which was fine because Renault was already making those parts and it worked. As for performance, well, by all accounts, this thing was a card carrying psychopath. The GT was a lightweight 658 kilogram body with a rear mounted Renault engine, so rear mounted like a Porsche, that offered what they term lively, nimble performance on winding roads. It allowed for top speeds between 169 and 217 kilometers an hour. Now, bear in mind that the top speed on Canadian highways at the time was maybe 100 kilometers an hour. So it was well over that. It was about 105 to 135 miles per hour, depending on the engine displacement. And the reports say that it was twitchy and required seriously skilled driving, like a Porsche. And so I guess, like a Porsche, it was perfect for wrapping around trees, basically, which Eastern Quebec has a lot of trees. So it was shaping up to be a pretty good alignment of all the planets. So we had the investment, we had the design, we had the quality car. Canada was going to enter the sports car market, baby. And then fate struck. A bad decision sort of stymied the plans. So About was paranoid about using Bombardier's production facilities. So he spent half of the seed money instead on building a factory in Granby, Quebec. And that's when the money started to get tight, and Renault started withholding part shipments because they weren't being paid. So the company kind of went belly up. And it's really sad because it was just simply poor execution and one bad decision that sealed its fate. But it resounds today as a Canadian benchmark. We did a thing, eh? We built a car. A pretty good one. Now, in 2026, there's a new Canadian car being offered. This time it's an EV. Project Aero is a premier all-Canadian concept electric SUV, spearheaded by the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, or APMA, to showcase Canada's EV supply chain capabilities. They unveiled it in 2023, and it uses 97% Canadian sourced parts, so no problem with Renault this time, featuring a 3D printed chassis and a 650 horsepower motor and a 550 kilometer range. So decent range. Intrigued? Well, me too. But before we get ahead of ourselves, there's a few points to make. It was actually launched by APMA as sort of a rolling business card designed to highlight Canada's expertise in electric drive, autonomous vehicles, and lightweight technology production. Developed in collaboration with Ontario Tech University and over 50 Canadian suppliers, it was backed by a $20 million investment. So $20 million is very similar to the $1.5 million that was invested in Manic GT back in 1970. So it's kind of like echoes, deja vu all over again. And it's not currently in mass production. But the project provides a kit for potential manufacturing, suggesting an annual volume of maybe 50,000 units. Now, 50,000 is pretty decent. I think this is more of a proof of concept of Canadians' capacity to produce a car rather than the car itself. But why not? We already have perhaps the most highly skilled automotive workers in the world. We're pretty much out of work because of Lutnick and his Führer, Trump. Maybe we should actually invest real money in bringing this car or other cars like it to market in Canada. What do you guys think? Should we go all in and build a Canadian car to compete with those sexy Chinese imports that we're starting to welcome in? Maybe we can leverage our partnership with China and learn from them, pick their brains on manufacturing techniques. Tell me what you think in the comments below. And as always, remember to like and subscribe. And until next time, boys, your mitts dry, your driveway plowed. Thanks.